Okay, it should be going. So does anyone have any questions that they want to ask first? Lizzie, I know you had some questions.
Oh yeah, I have a ton. Since you guys are engineering majors, I've often heard that like engineering is one of the harder majors and it's a lot of work. So, would you consider your course load more rigorous than that of other majors?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Because not only do we take a lot of courses, but because a lot of them are like technical classes like math and sciences, it's like really challenging because it's not just like memorizing facts, but also learning how to problem solve. So I would definitely say it's a lot harder than other majors.
And I think because there's a lot of material to cover too, even with general subjects like calculus and physics, you often spend like a lot of time each week studying. So it just feels like a lot sometimes. I would agree it's a decent course load.
Yeah, definitely to piggyback what they both said, it's definitely a very decent and kind of heavy course load, but it's definitely doable. And you definitely, if you have like just friends in engineering, it doesn't sound as bad because you're all going through the same thing. But when you have friends in different majors, like I remember freshman year, I had a lot of friends who were like business majors, and like you can see them sometimes like they're like always so ready to hang out, and you're like, how are you guys hanging out so often? Like I don't have time to do that. So sometimes, not that you're comparing yourself, but when you like see like one major versus another major, it's like sometimes it's harder, sometimes you have less free time than other majors, but in the end it's definitely worthwhile and it's definitely really rewarding.
Just to go off of what Melissa was saying, please don't let that deter you from going into engineering. Like, yeah, it is a little difficult at times, but it's very rewarding, and especially all of the skills you learn from taking all these hard classes, not just content-wise, but also about organization and what learning style works for you. It really does help you in the long run.
Yeah, and to like piggyback from Melissa, it's definitely manageable, especially if you have like somewhat good time management skills. And if you're constantly surrounding yourself by people who are in the same field as you, because then you guys could struggle together and it's okay. It's kind of fun.
Now, I remember hearing one of you say before that on top of doing engineering as a major, you also minor in business. How's that? Because they generally don't seem together. But what is your schedule like in that sense?
So that was me. So I'm an incoming junior, and I decided to do my business minor actually like over the summer. So I've only taken 2 classes now, and for most minors, there's 6 classes, which is equal to 18 extra additional credits. Um, it doesn't sound exactly what you're saying. Like, it doesn't sound like super related. Like, oh, biomedical engineering, you think of like healthcare and like working in like a hospital industry type. But then when you hear like business administration, you're like, oh, you're running a business, but you're working in a hospital. But the stuff that you actually learn within like the 6 business classes that you take are super applicable in particular. So I'm majoring in biomedical engineering, but career-wise, I want to work in industry with medical devices. And from one of the 2 classes that I've already taken for the business minor, something really important that I learned was new product development. And that sounds super self-explanatory, like you're making something, you're making a new product, you're developing it. But that was just like from a basic standpoint. But like the stuff that I learned from my business classes of like all of like the economic things that go into that, and like the framework of the new product development department within the entire company itself, it's like really cool, specifically because I want to go into industry. But yeah, it's like really interesting because not only do you get like a lot of technical skills from the engineering classes that you're taking, but you're also learning like some soft skills, some professional skills, and like the business lingo with the minors that you take.
Cool.
So I have a general question for everyone. What does it mean for you to be a woman in STEM? Since this is mainly engineering's very male dominated, so how does that like make you feel going through your classes, and if you've had any internships?
I feel like for me, it's kind of like maybe constantly setting a precedent for other girls that want to join engineering and like the future generation. So for me, though it can be like challenging seeing, less women as the higher I go in my, I guess, journey with engineering. It also kind of makes me, proud and happy that I am continuing and that I'm only my first year. I only completed my first year, but like even going into my second year, I don't know, I just feel like it's good that I'm kind of setting a precedent for future girls that want to do engineering. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like that idea, like that underlying idea, the fact that it's only a male-dominated career is always there. Sometimes you feel it in your classes and you're trying to get like research and internships, but like Abigail said, it's so rewarding. And the fact that you can set an example and still succeed, because not only do you have resources like this, like your club at your school and Target, there's always going to be a way to do it. So I think it's really rewarding and you shouldn't let anything deter you.
And definitely I agree with what they've both said. And something else that I've noticed specifically in a classroom setting is that you can definitely see that it's like more male dominated, but you don't really feel it. And that's something, at least specifically at Rutgers, that I find to be like super great, where like of course you're definitely going to have some people who have like an inflated ego to that extent, but that's like with everywhere you go with any major. But like in the classroom setting or in a laboratory setting, you'll definitely see that there's more guys than girls, like ratio wise. But like when you're working together, especially specifically engineering, because it's really heavy on like teamwork, when you're working together or you're in calc class, you're taking notes, like you don't really feel it, especially if you surround yourself by the friends that you want to surround yourself by. So like from my experience, I definitely have more guy friends that are girl friends, because just the way engineering works. And you definitely, it's something, like I said, you definitely see it, but it doesn't like feel negative in the moment when you're most importantly in the classroom setting.
What I found in a lot of my classes was the girls always kind of binded together, and we had this really nice sisterhood thing going on where we were like, okay, you know, where there's like 5 of us in a class of 80 kids, like we gotta show them who's boss. So we kind of all like work together to get up there. So that sense of teamwork, as Melissa was saying, is really, really nice. And you can definitely see that in Rutgers a lot.
And just to add on to that, Rutgers also has the Douglas Women College. So because of that program, Abigail and I are in it, and I was able to meet a lot of other women in engineering. So I definitely think Rutgers has a lot of diversity in terms of like the gender disparity. But yeah, just know that there are opportunities for you to meet other female engineers.
Yeah, we were able to live on the same floor and like basically kind of get closer by doing that.
Yeah, as Selena has mentioned specifically, there's definitely like a lot of clubs and like organizations that can help you like bond together, whether you start engineering at this, like start your classes at the same time or like sometime like a few weeks before the summer. Specifically, if you were to start at the same time, there's organizations called SHE, which is Society of Hispanic Engineers, and there's also SWE, which is Society of Women Engineers. So one of them is specifically for women, but anybody can join, both men and women. And then one of them, it says Hispanics, but it's just the aspect of like diversity, because there's also another one called MEET, and that's another one about diversity. So it's just like women and diversity all at the same time, and we're doing engineering. Like it's a lot happening at the same time, but there's so many clubs and organizations that you can be a part of to like join and like work together with people that look like you and have similar background views as you. And that's something that's honestly very appreciative and sometimes very refreshing, because it can get a little overwhelming. You're like, oh my God, there's so many men, this and that. But when you join these orgs, you don't have to stay the whole time, and it's just by your choice of when you go to the meetings and when you don't. But it's just very refreshing to know that you have like a group of people that you can go to that look like you and that have been through the same experience as you.
Does anyone else have any other questions they'd like to ask?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, my microphone wasn't working last week, so I wasn't sure. Alright, so this is like not really about like women in STEM, but like I was just wondering like what made you choose like the specific like engineering, like biomed or like chemical engineering, like what made you choose it over the others?
That's a great question, Michelle.
Yeah, that is a really good question. Thank you. Like I said before, I am planning on going to the pre-med track. So after my undergrad, I'm hoping to get into med school. And when people first think of pre-med track, they think, oh, like cell biology, neuroscience, biology, but the reason why I chose biomedical engineering was because through biomedical engineering, you can really look at the body as an entire system rather than just a conglomerate of chemical processes. And also, you'll hear this from a lot of different engineers that the skill sets you obtain from the classes that you take is very, very applicable. So even though, like, if I do get into medical school, I'm not going to be using like Calc 3 and differential equations, but just how I learn to study for my classes, because as we mentioned before, the exams are pretty tough and the classes are also pretty tough. So how you learn to study, how you learn what works best for you, how you learn to take these exams, these are skills that can take you along so far no matter what field you're going into. So I chose biomedical specifically because obviously biology, but also because it could give me a better picture of what's going on. And also engineering is going to help me develop those technical skills and those soft skills that I'm potentially going to need later on in my life.
And to piggyback on that, though I am pursuing a biomechanics track, like kind of biomedical engineering, I didn't want to go to medical school. So I was like, okay, maybe to make it more flexible for me, I would major first in mechanical engineering, and then hopefully in my graduate I can focus on biomedical engineering. But yeah, you can definitely be really flexible. There's very different routes, and yeah, that's why I chose mechanical.
The reason I chose biomedical engineering and also business minor was because, like, in the beginning, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I knew my strengths were in math and science, but I didn't know, like, specifically, like, what I wanted to, how do I wanted to apply that. And then I remember just, like, looking up things online, like, senior year of high school and being, like, highest, like, job rate, kind of, because at first I wanted to be an astronaut, which sounds super cool, and I'm still interested in it, but it's, like, the job rate is, like, not where I would want it to be. So I kind of made it, like, a more practical decision, aside from, like, my own personal interest of, like, wanting to do biomedical engineering, and then I was, like, torn between engineering and business, so I just decided to do a business minor. But I'm super excited that I'm super happy that I did, and specifically because I feel like the target counselors, like, we can all agree on this to some extent. There are some classes that you take where either something that you learn in one class is the same thing that you learn in another class, and it's, like, really exciting when you're like, oh, that makes sense because we learned it in a different class. Or when you take a class and you learn something that's, like, so fundamental you didn't even know that, like, you lived without knowing that information. I feel like those little aspects of, like, engineering classes is just so cool. Specifically freshman year, when I took statics, which is a course about forces that are, like, not moving, we learned all about these structures and trusses, and there's things that, like, are in building and in bridges. But specifically with bridges, like, I've never been able to look at a bridge the same after having taken that class. And there's, like, little things like that with engineering classes where it's like, oh my god, this is so cool. Like, not that I'm a nerd, but it's just like, wow, that's so cool.
I can go next. So I'm studying chemical engineering, and I think the most basic reason that I picked it, the reason I started researching it more in high school, was because chemistry was my favorite subject and had a really good experience with my AP teacher. But as I looked more into it and I did research on my own and talked to past students and, like, other advisors, I just learned how versatile and vast, like, the major was. Chemical engineers work in nearly every single industry, like pharmaceuticals and renewable energy and consumer products, and those were the kind of things that I saw myself doing. And like Melissa said, like, in terms of engineering, I think you'll see once you learn more about it, all the disciplines overlap so much too. So really, you can go into anything that you find interest in, and you can work in any field. And like she was saying too, like, the practical aspect, chemical engineering is known to be a very practical discipline, so you can work in nearly every field afterwards. So yeah, I think that's what drew me to it. But then again, I'm only a rising sophomore, so we don't really have the experience with, like, the junior, senior level classes. But I just know that at Rutgers, with the skill level, like, that I will learn in chemical engineering, I'll be able to find a career I like.
I definitely agree with that. I feel like when I was coming to Rutgers, I didn't really know what exactly I wanted to major in, but there's an intro to engineering class where they expose you to all the different disciplines, and through that, I was able to learn about each different major and see how they apply their knowledge to the real world. And I eventually decided on electrical and computer engineering, mainly because I really enjoy coding. And I was also even considering just majoring in CS, but I wanted to do engineering for just like the problem solving aspect and also have a more well-rounded experience with like hardware and computers.
Thanks, guys. Those were really good answers.
I'm just curious, do you guys work on other like projects just by yourself outside of class?
Sort of. Like I do research and most of like those research work is like project based. But besides that, like I usually don't like work on like other projects for myself. So yeah.
Yeah, I do research as well. I feel like because there's just so much, it's kind of hard to like do everything. But yeah, I like research. It's really fun. It depends on your PI, that like the person that you work with, like the person that's in charge. If they're more enthusiastic about it and they're like welcoming and they accept that I'm an undergrad and I don't know every single thing that they're doing, then it's a lot of fun.
To piggyback off of what Selena and Abigail said, I'm also involved in research, and I like do my own like reading on the side additionally, just to get like a better understanding, and so that when we have like weekly it depends on like the research team that you're working on, but sometimes you'll have like weekly or bi-weekly or monthly meetings, and like you doing your own research on the research, like research has been like reading other articles online, it like prepares you more for like the types of conversations that you would have in those meetings, and it definitely broadens your understanding. I only did one like personal research by myself where I was like looking up information, just like not a specific project, but just like kind of like educating myself. And then actually one time in an interview with the research group that I'm working with now, I was able to talk about the research that I did by myself with that. So that was definitely a good question that you asked. And I definitely do recommend that if you're like interested in something at all, like you learn about it one time in class and you're like, oh, that's cool, I want to look more into that. Definitely recommend that you do, and it'll definitely like expose you to other things that you're interested in. So it's actually pretty cool.
Going off of the research topic a little more, at Rutgers, or if you do choose to go to Rutgers at least, there's a lot of room for research. You will find dozens and dozens of faculty members who I'm sure would be interested in something you're doing, or you'll find that your interests align with them. So don't be afraid to talk to them and tell them about what you're reading, because that's how I actually got into my research.
Yeah, I was so intimidated. At first, I was doing an environmental engineering lab, and though it was really fun and I had good times, it wouldn't really correlate with my major. So I had to email like a bunch of professors, I guess you can say, and it was really intimidating at first. But they were very like, "Oh no, it's okay, I declined." But some were really accepting and accepted me. So it's not that intimidating.
And I personally, at the moment, am not involved in research, but I'm taking some summer classes towards a minor. And just to build off of it, during the year, Rutgers not only offers a lot of research, but also a lot of engineering clubs that do a lot of cool projects like ChemiCar and like cardboard canoes and stuff like that. So I think one advice just to give right off the bat is to put yourself out there, especially even in your first year at Rutgers, because there are just so many engineering opportunities that you'll find something that interests you.
So another question that I think everyone could benefit for is what kind of STEM classes did you take when you guys were in high school, and how has that like helped prepared you for your majors?
I think definitely the ones to knock off right off the bat are AP Physics and AP Chemistry. AP Physics, I know in my high school there was an AP Physics B and an AP Physics C. I suggest taking AP Physics C, because even if you do choose to take the AP Physics C AP test, you can get credit for that, and the same thing goes with chemistry. And even if you choose not to take the AP class, college classes are definitely more rigorous than AP classes. So even if you have a little bit of background knowledge, especially in those two, because those are core requirements, it can definitely benefit you.
Yeah, I feel like taking AP classes in general, because at first I didn't know that I wanted to do engineering. I took things like AP Psychology, US History, Government, and know that they don't really correlate with STEM. I took Calc 1 and AP Biology, but it really kind of helped me prepare for how rigorous college courses can be, and it made it less intimidating going into college. And even those little classes that I took, I actually knocked off a lot of humanities courses that I have to take at Rutgers, so you could do those too.
Yeah, I definitely like what Swarmina and Abigail mentioned, because it's like two different sides of the spectrum, but both very applicable. My experience was similar to Swarmina's, where I definitely took like the math and science ones. Like I took AP Calc and physics and chem and those courses, but also what Abigail mentioned with like the humanities, such as like U.S. government or like U.S. history. They're also helpful based off your like interest, if that's what you're interested in, but they also count as humanities, which is super cool. Something that I also would like to mention, this is like more specific, like once you're already like applying to the college or to the universities, hopefully Rutgers, is that if you were to say, for example, to take AP Calc and you take the exam, just be aware that for engineering at Rutgers, you're going to have to go up until Calc 4. So depending how comfortable you feel with the information that you learned in Calc 1 in high school, whenever you take the AP exam, whatever score you get, you have the option whether to send it to the school or not send it to the school, and that applies to like every university. So if you like, let's say you did really good and you got a 4, but like you didn't feel really confident in all of the material from Calc 1, I don't want to say you got lucky, but you were just like, yeah, I just studied really, really hard that one day for the exam, but I don't feel comfortable with the material to start in Calc 2. At school, I would definitely take that into consideration, because it's like really exciting that you have like that class completed, but since you have to do like at least 3 other Calc classes, sometimes you want to weigh in the option whether do I want to strengthen my foundation in Calc 1 or do I go on to Calc 2. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, because like when I started Rutgers, they placed me in pre-calc, and I did take AP Calc, like Calc 1 in high school, and I was like, what? Why would they do that? But it turns out that I just needed to strengthen my foundation in math, and it was actually, I'm really happy that I did take pre-calc and then I continued on, because it would just make your life difficult moving on to higher calc classes, not really knowing the basic foundations of math. So not math, but like, just general stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to like the original question. So like everyone said, I think in a general sense, challenging yourself with math and science is always good, because that'll prepare you for the coursework in college, which can get pretty difficult. But also just, especially, I'm sure some of you guys must be applying to college this fall, but showing yourself as like a well-rounded student, the fact that you not only took science and math courses, but you tried out language and history and English can really help, not only in the sense of your application, but in an interview can give you more to talk about. And I'm not sure what you guys' school is like. Personally, I had some engineering specific courses at my school, and that was really cool because I had some skills like learning about different disciplines and learning AutoCAD and engineering drawing beforehand, so that was always helpful.
Yeah, just to add on to that, like, don't be too stressed about like getting credit for the courses. Sometimes it's important to just like expose yourself to the material. I know when I was in high school, I definitely took a lot of STEM classes, but also a lot of humanities classes. And when I came to Rutgers, I realized that those credits actually counted towards my degree. So definitely try out different things, and maybe you'll discover like a new subject that you enjoy.
That's great advice. Thank you, guys.
Okay, I have another question. So, like, in class, like, do you guys ever do, like, any projects? And if you do, is it usually, like, independently? Or, like, do you have to, like, is it more, like, teamwork?
That's a great question. We do projects. Yes, super exciting. Most of the projects, at least from my experience, have been in labs. Freshman year, it's more of your general classes, such as like this is like freshman year both semesters, like Calc 1 and 2, Chem 1 and 2, Physics 1 and 2, and like English and MATLAB. So those classes, not specifically like hands-on projects where you're building something, but in the MATLAB course, which is like a coding course, you have a group project that you have to complete throughout the semester. And then in labs is mainly when you do like actual hands-on projects, but specifically senior year, you have 2 classes. called Senior Design Lab, Senior Design Lab 1 and Senior Design Lab 2 for both, one for each semester. And that's when you work with the group, maybe like 4 or 5 people, depending on by your choice. You get to pick who you want to work with. And you kind of get sponsored by a professor. So you would have to ask a professor of like, because he would, to some extent, that professor would grade you on the work that you do. And you're actually like making something as an end of the year, as like after all 4 years, or after all 3 years, what you've learned, and you actually get to make something, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so with the projects, you can pick who you work with, which is really exciting. Typically, like once you sit in the lab, the people that you sit next to are going to be your teammates. But it's not something like in high school where they're like, okay, you are together, you know. It's more like you find a seat. Those are the people you're going to work with just out of convenience because you sat next to each other.
I think just to add off to like what Melissa's saying, I think one challenge that comes with group projects in college though is that they're often on a much larger scale than they were in high school. So you have to really learn how to work with these people on a day-to-day basis and communicate, make sure everyone's getting their part done. And that can be difficult because you may not know who you're working with, but it's definitely an important skill to learn for engineering, and it personally helped me a lot. Oh, and one more thing to add. On a day-to-day basis, you don't really work in like large projects, but for most general classes your first year, you would have lectures in a large group and then also a recitation, which is in a smaller group each week with your class to focus more on the material and go over what you did. So those classes often facilitate a lot of teamwork in terms of like working on math or physics problems. So I think in a general sense, collaboration is very important in engineering, and you'll see that if you decide to pursue it.
Aside from the classroom, you can also see it when you're studying or something. I know for physics, I would always like studying in groups just because sometimes I would have trouble with the material. So that also definitely helps you make friends and get to know how to talk to people, which is very important, as Anusri said.
Something else that's like secretly important is like the power of GroupMe. Like you think it's just like, oh yeah, it's just a little app where you get to talk to people. No, that is just like everything. Because apparently there's like an issue of like texting people if like you have iPhones and Androids. I've never experienced that issue, but apparently that's a thing. Whenever you get in and start working in groups, being in a group chat through GroupMe is super helpful because sometimes email is not readily accessible, and like sometimes some people get nervous because like you think you have to be professional in an email. But through GroupMe you can always communicate like, hey, like I noticed like the project is due tomorrow and you haven't done your part yet. Like, it's good with that. So it's just like a really quick, easy means of communication that if you don't have that app yet, definitely by the time you go into college, highly recommend it.
Yeah, I have a GroupMe for every single class on my schedule for fall and every class. It's so helpful.
Yeah, like I think we were mainly using like Google Classroom or something, and then in college, like we kind of moved over to GroupMe and Slack, just because like gives you like a more professional setting, I guess, to work together and not with other people.
So I don't know if you guys could see, but in the chat, Hari had a question. She said it's too loud where she is. So she says, how do you guys deal with the stress of your classes?
I would
That's
say,
Oh,
me?
Yeah, you can go.
Oh, okay. I would say the most important thing, well, one thing I had very great difficulty doing is basically managing me and my classes. I tend to put work first over everything, like schoolwork, just over like family, friends. So the best way I was able to like deal with the stress of my classes is to kind of set some time for like me, if that makes sense. Like just set some time for like self-care, or just maybe even like spending time with like my family, my sister, because when I find myself just putting school in front of everything, it like gets very overwhelming, and having that small break is like very beneficial. But like with stress in general, I find myself more stressed out when I can't manage my time, when I, you know what I mean, when I do put everything first or things like that. So managing your time and putting time for yourself is also how I handle stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, first semester I was definitely very concerned about like my academics. So I didn't really do any side hobbies, wasn't really concerned about, like getting involved in or anything. But after second semester, like I knew how to like manage my time. So I was able to like start going to the gym and do like different activities. And I just felt like if I focused too much on my grades and stuff, I felt like I became even more unproductive. So it's definitely important to give yourself time just for your side hobbies.
Personally, for one thing that really helped me is that first semester I found a friend who I had a lot of classes with and who also lived in the same dorm as me. So we could easily study together and go to classes together. So just having someone there to do everything with you, like you can allot breaks and, kind of take control of the situation rather than just being on your own to stress out. I think that really helped me. And it's always nice to surround yourself with people.
Yeah. The two most important things that I did was at least freshman year and sophomore year when we were like in person is that I set time apart to like work out. Specifically, I joined the frisbee team at Rutgers, which was like super awesome because it's like very competitive, but like it's also like it's like a stress reliever, but it's also like a lot of fun, and then you get to work out and like you maintain an active lifestyle. And since it wasn't like an athletic team, it was just like a club team, so we only practiced twice a week. Like the timing was like appropriate. And then something else that kind of relates to just joining any club specifically is just definitely being realistic with yourself and the time that you have available. I find it super awesome to just like write my schedule. I love making schedules. I don't know why, but I love like writing everything down that I have to do and then like crossing it out when I complete it. It's like so amazing. But it's definitely like if you want to do, you can do that, like just everything all at once, or you can say, okay, by the end of the day, I'm going to have this done. But definitely keep it realistic because sometimes you can overwhelm yourself. You're like, oh, I want to get all this stuff done. And like you don't get it done and then you push it on to the next day and the next day. And then it just gets really overwhelming. But if you're realistic with yourself and you're like, okay, I can't do 3 chapters of that one class and then 5 chapters of another one. It's like, okay, maybe I can do 2 chapters here. Maybe I have to skip that whatever I was watching. But it's just keeping yourself in a routine to some extent, but also just like appreciating yourself and knowing like what you're capable of doing.
To piggyback off Melissa, having an agenda pad saved me in college. Write down your assignments, even if you have like an interview call or something that you don't think will slip your mind, just write it down. Trust me, there are so many things going on in your mind that can slip it. And then one more thing is it's fine to have expectations for yourself, but know that it's okay to not always be like the top of something, because I feel like that's something that we don't usually do good with, failure. So if you don't get an A on a test you've been studying really hard for, or something does not work out your way, just breathe. Don't worry about it, because sometimes we just are really, really hard on ourselves. So make sure you don't do that, because that really hurt me in college.
So I have another question for you guys. Did any of you have any role models that helped motivate you to choose a career in STEM, or just helped you get going while you were stressed with all the studying that you guys have mentioned?
I feel like
I would definitely say my dad. He was also an engineer. He's a software engineer. And yeah, I don't know. He kind of just went through the same things that I did, just like in Puerto Rico. So like it's a little different. But yeah, he was just like super motivational, super inspirational. And like he's like one of those people who are like really hardworking and like do everything for like his daughters. And that's like one of the cutest thing ever. It's like someone that you look up to and you're like, wow, look at the success of your daughters. It's like kind of got to pay him back to some extent. But yeah, I would say my dad.
I would agree too. My dad is also a chemical engineer, so similar to what Melissa said, he kind of understands what I'm going through, whether they be like the classes or just the stress of engineering in general. So I think he really helped me and like supported me through my decision.
Also at Rutgers, there's also like mentorship programs where you get matched with like an upperclassman or even someone in industry. I know for me, like I think we had like a mentorship pod for Douglas, and you were able to like meet other engineers who were like already like juniors and seniors, and you were able to hear about their experiences. And yeah, I definitely think it's like a great way to like just see how college life is like, and also just learn more about Rutgers through their experiences.
That's a really good resource that you guys have. I hope that's more available in other colleges as well as Rutgers. But it sounds like Rutgers has a really good support system for you guys.
I have a question. Okay, so I've heard from some people that like you should like set like hard long-term goals, like what company you want to work for, what exactly you want to do, what exactly you want to do with your job. But then I've also heard things that like you don't know where life might take you, like you might not end up where you thought you were going to be, so you should also be more flexible. So, what would you say? Would it be better to like set hard long-term goals or to kind of more go with the flow?
I feel like setting hard long-term goals just is kind of just a setup for disappointment, if that makes sense, or just being more hard on yourself. I think just setting a goal is important. And then from there, you're just open-minded to flexibility. Like, I don't know, maybe the biomed track is not for me, and I want to do more things in chemical with mechanical engineering. I don't know if that's a thing, but maybe it is. But for me, like I feel like it's better just to be like, okay, I have one goal, mechanical, but if something else happens, I'm okay with that. So yeah, don't set too hard goals because then you're just going to be too hard on yourself, and then you're going to beat yourself down when you don't reach those hard goals, and then it just recipe for disaster.
I agree. I think it's good to keep like overarching goals because those can keep you motivated and help you see what you're interested in and what you should research more. But also at a place like a Rutgers, like a university, there's going to be so many opportunities that come your way that it's nearly impossible to plan your entire path. So I think keeping overarching goals is good, but really just go with the flow. Makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what both Abigail and Anusri said. But yeah, just keeping one goal or just like a few like interrelated similar goals is important so that you have to look forward to, so like kind of like a light at the end of the tunnel. But definitely like having like timestamps to your goals, it could be like super like deterring, just as Abigail said. Specifically, if you're like, oh, I want to be this type of engineer with this minor, want to graduate in 4 years, want to do this, want to do that, like that makes it very strict on yourself. And I just feel like that makes it harder, specifically because not everyone's going to graduate in 4 years. Maybe the way your schedule worked out, like you didn't have time to fit in the minor. So it's like a lot of things that can happen, like life can happen, where it's going to make it really hard if you have specifically what you want to do. But as you had mentioned, like, yeah, you can definitely like look up companies, and like even if you don't end up working there career-wise, maybe you can get like an internship there. So definitely like do a little bit of research about these goals that you want to do and keep them as options, but not specifically like something that you have to check off your list that you did in your life. If that makes sense.
And one thing I realize is that we all kind of have our own different timelines. Don't like compare yourself. If like X, Y, and Z have 3 internships by now, it's okay that you don't have 1 internship because your time is going to come. And that's just one thing I really learned because I would always compare myself. I'm like, oh, they're doing this and that. I'm over here like still studying Calc 1. Like, I don't know. I would always feel that way, but it's okay because my time will come and your time will come too. So yeah, that's just one thing.
Another bad thing about setting hard goals is that it can deter you from other possibilities. Like say you really, really want to work for X company, but then you get an opportunity from Y. Don't let your dream deter you from taking up that opportunity. So again, just be open to all of your possibilities, and when opportunity comes knocking on the door, take it. Like I know it's cliche, but anything that comes, try it, go for it. You never know what you're gonna feel. You might love it.
Yeah, it's definitely really important to be open-minded. And in terms of like getting to a specific company, don't think too much about like prestige and like, company name. I think it's really important to think about the kind of impact you want to make. So if there are any other opportunities, definitely take the chance because you never know what might happen. And don't just focus on professional goals. I think it's also really important for you to as well.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I have something to ask. So, like, since we're talking about like goals and opportunities, do you guys like have you guys like thought about like any of study abroad programs at Rutgers for like engineering?
Yeah, I've always wanted to do study abroad, but I don't know, like, I just hear every time I ask an upperclassman about like, oh, can I do study abroad? They're just like, it's just gonna be a lot difficult. I don't know. I don't have much input. Does anyone else have input on that?
I agree. From the conversations I've had, it's usually not likely for engineers to do it simply because there's just so many credits you have to take every semester that adding on an extra semester is not really appealing to most people, so they kind of avoid it. But I think it's definitely a possibility, and if you're interested in it, don't let that stop you, because adding an extra semester might be worth it if you find a program that you really like.
I actually wanted to do a study abroad program next year. I wanted to do it during the summer. And I wasn't going to take my engineering classes. I was actually going to fulfill my elective requirements, which I highly recommend because it's easier to do your technical classes at an actual university. Whereas, like when you study abroad, you obviously want to explore the culture, explore the city where you're staying at. So definitely take a class that's going to be a little bit lighter. But there is a study abroad department kind of, and they host all of their students. They tell you about what scholarships you're eligible about. And as of right now, obviously with the circumstances, there's not much talk about study abroad. But if you have questions about it, I'm sure whichever school you choose to go to, there will be a specific department dedicated for that. So definitely make sure you check that out.
Would you guys be able to do something like Engineers Without Borders for a study abroad kind of thing?
For Engineers Without Borders, you're essentially working on one specific project, and they send like 3 to 4 students who are super active in that specific project abroad to work on that specific project. So I wouldn't say it's study abroad. I think it's more like getting more technical experience with engineering, and the trips are usually around like 2 weeks.
A nice vacation.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. This one's more for Selena, since you're like into computer engineering and electrical enough and all that stuff. So I want to know what's the differences between like electrical engineering, computer engineering, and CS, because I like that stuff. I like artificial intelligence. I like programming, but I also like knowing general stuff. I want to know general stuff as well. So what are the differences between like those 3 fields?
So I don't know too much about electrical engineering, but in terms of computer engineering and CS, if you go into the School of Engineering, it focuses more on hardware, whereas if you just do CS, it's more like theory and like coding. So I feel like computer engineering itself and also electrical engineering, it gives you like a broader perspective of computers. So even though I want to go into like software engineering, I could have easily done CS, but I just wanted to learn more about the hardware aspects of computers, and I just felt like I wouldn't be able to get that from just doing CS. And because they're in 2 different schools, that also plays a huge role. So if you do the School of Engineering, you have more of like a technical background, so a lot of science and math classes, whereas for the School of Arts and Sciences, you have more of like a well-rounded experience because you're able to take more humanities. So it really depends on what kind of background you want to have, because regardless of which one you do, I feel like you can always like get a job in another field.
To emphasize what Selena said about getting a job in a different field, within biomedical engineering at Rutgers, there's a track with one of the tracks is called like imaging and like computation. So that's one, especially that I've been to like career fairs, like everybody wants to hire electrical and computer engineers and mechanical engineers because like that's one of like the most broad engineerings that they can do like almost absolutely everything. But then with specifically like biomedical and like chemical engineering, you're a little bit more specific, but you can still do a lot of things because of all the skill sets that you learn. But going back to like the electrical and computer engineering, you can use that within fields in biomedical engineering for imaging devices such like an MRI, a CT scan, but more specifically, for an example, would be with ultrasound. And as you mentioned that you're interested with like machine learning and like artificial intelligence, I remember there was a class that I took where they gave the example that when you're using like an ultrasound, if you have an experienced technician, they're like super expensive because with an experienced technician, they're better at finding the best image when they're doing the ultrasound versus an inexperienced technician is cheaper because they have less experience, but they take worse quality images. But they're working on ways to work with like artificial intelligence where they like feed the machine like good images and bad images so that the machine, instead of having a technician where you would have to pay them different rates based on like their experience level, you would train a machine to know what a good image looks like, what a bad image looks like, and then they would produce the best image. And like the process of like working with that machine is expensive, but like once it's running, you don't have to keep paying for it. So that's like a specific application of like computer and electrical engineering using like specifically machine learning and artificial intelligence. But when you're talking about like ultrasound in like a healthcare industry setting, it's kind of like biomedical engineering, if that makes sense.
Do you guys have any like robotics programs at Rutgers? Like any clubs, classes, anything like that?
We have IEEE. I'm pretty sure that's like the big robotics club, and we do some like pretty interesting like projects. I think they even compete like on a national level. I don't have experience with the club, but there's definitely a robotics club.
Yeah, I also don't have experience with those clubs, but they definitely do exist. And if not like specifically a club, you can definitely email professors. Even if they're not engineering professors, you can email like computer science professors or anything of that sort. And once you look up like the professor name and then put like Rutgers behind it, most professors have like either they have a website or they have they're on the Rutgers website with like information about them and the research that they do. So based off the research that they do, if it's something that you're interested in, you can work in that field of like robotics through that connection instead of joining a club.
So I have a question. It's kind of more for Abigail. So what's the difference between the biomechanics track that you're taking and just biomedical engineering in general?
I think similar to what, if I were to be taking just biomedical engineering and pursuing a med track, that's like completely different. I don't know what exactly is the difference, but I know the difference. But sorry. Basically, you're just focusing on the mechanical side of biomedical engineering. You're not really focusing on like because I know like with it, I have to take like biology courses and I have to take like chem obviously. But for example, I don't know with SWME like how your track is, but most likely I'm just taking more mechanical, if that makes sense. Like I'm focusing on prosthetics, machinery, less. I remember someone explained this to me really well, and I'm doing really poorly at it. But yeah, basically just the mechanical side of biomedical engineering, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
definitely what Abigail said. Oh, sorry. Oh no, that's fine. But yeah, so as Abigail mentioned, with like mechanical engineering, specifically biomechanics, it's like you're still involving the bio aspect of it for the application wise, but your broad general education background is within mechanical engineering, so it's a bit more technical versus biomedical engineering. We have 3 tracks. One of them is the imaging and computation one, which is like very similar to like electrical and computer science. The second one is biomechanics and rehabilitation engineering, so it's also like very similar to that. And then the third one is tissue engineering, and a lot of people who are doing pre-med go into tissue engineering because that's like even more of like the bio and the chem related aspects. So yeah, so you can do biomechanics within mechanical engineering, or you can do biomechanics and rehabilitation engineering within biomedical engineering. The difference is that when you're doing it with mechanical engineering, you're working more on mechanical aspects of it. But then when you're doing it with biomedical engineering, you're keeping more of like the biological aspects of it. So it's kind of like you learn the same skill set. It's just you have a stronger skill set in mechanical or a stronger skill set in biomedical.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's really good to know. That's more of the side of engineering that I'm interested in. So I'm very glad that you guys explained it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Does anyone else have any questions? It's kind of getting close to 5 o'clock, so I don't know if you guys want to start wrapping it up or if you guys want to keep going.
People usually say like physics and engineering are pretty closely related, but how exactly do they differ? Do you guys know?
The difference between physics and engineering?
Like the majors, because like from what it seems, physics majors and engineering majors, like they're pretty similar, but how do they like exactly differ?
That's a good question. Because I don't know the requirements for physics majors. I'm pretty sure they fall under the School of Arts and Sciences. Obviously, you would take more physics courses. But within engineering, I think maybe that with engineering, you have more of a technical background. Specifically for mechanical and biomedical engineering, you have to take 4 physics classes and 2 labs. So you take Physics 1A and 2A. Physics 1A and Physics 1B, which is more of like the kinematics physics. And then you take Physics 2A, which is electromagnetic, electricity and magnetism. And then you take a lab. And then Physics 2B is basically quantum mechanics and optics. And then you also take a lab. So within engineering, you're definitely like really strong in your physics courses. And then I feel like with the physics major, that might be more theoretical because you would still be not taking the exact same classes because there's physics for engineers and then there's physics for the physics major. So they're different classes, same information that you learn, but it's just a little bit different because they're different majors. But yeah, I feel like the physics major would be a little bit more theoretical because physics at some point does get very theoretical, especially with quantum mechanics. It gets very difficult. But yeah, I think with engineering, there's more like technical skills involved. Not saying that the physics major doesn't have that, but I would feel like with engineering, there's more technical skills involved, and it might be a little bit more well-rounded. With the physics major, I assume you can obviously take like other classes, so you can make your schedule as well-rounded as you want. But specifically with engineering, your schedule is kind of made for you, so like they made you well-rounded. Versus with physics major, you would have to pick it and decide on your own how well-rounded you want to make your schedule. If that makes sense.
I feel like with engineering also, depending on whatever discipline you go into, the physics is more applicable in certain senses. So like Melissa was saying, for physics majors, you're probably going to be more theoretical. But then like, suppose you're going into biomedical engineering, right? You might be using a lot more of what you learned in optics, so a lot more of what you learned in 2B rather than kinematics, whereas in mechanical, you might be applying a different sector of physics. So they're kind of similar, but I can answer some questions you have about engineering. Physics, I think you would have to talk to someone from SAS.
All right.
So do you guys have any last advice for us? Any advice for just women in STEM in general? I mean, we covered a lot of stuff, so.
Well, I mean, I guess one thing I can leave you guys with is you're in high school, don't be afraid to try new things. And same thing in college, like there may be a club that you might think is completely absurd. Like I never thought of joining salsa club, but I ended up loving it. So even if it's not necessarily STEM related, if something sounds cool, go for it. You really never know where your interests lie until you really try it for yourself.
I think generally my advice would be to be open-minded, like Swarnima said, try new things. And also just don't be scared, don't be nervous if you don't know exactly what you want to do yet. It's totally okay to not know it at your age. And I understand that can be stressful, especially if you guys are applying to college and applying to like schools. So just don't be stressed and just know that engineering is a totally viable career for women. Don't let anything stop you.
That's some really great advice, guys. That's a very strong note to end on. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you learned something from our Rutgers Engineering panel. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and now you can follow us on our new Instagram account. Bye!